Hello, and welcome to the Inspirante podcast. My name is Arnav. I'm one of the co-founders and co-presidents of Inspirante Education. I'm a 17-year-old rising senior at Limerick High School who's passionate about studying computer science. In school, I'm captain of the Limerick Policy Debate Team and president of the First Tech Challenge Robotics Team. I'm eager to give back to my community as I'm deeply involved in leading nonprofit operations oriented around community service. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Inspirante podcast. The college application process can be extremely daunting and can even be difficult as an underclassman to build a resume with academic and extracurricular achievements to showcase on college applications. Today, I'll be talking with Ms. Angela Sun, a self-employed college admissions consultant with years of experience with the college application process, about many of the details behind the college applications. Welcome, Angela. We're glad to have you on the show.
Hi guys, glad to be here.
How's your quarantine been so far, especially with regard to dealing with the college application process over time?
Personally, my quarantine has been pretty good. I've been doing a lot of arts and crafts. I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's like a flower mobile that I made recently, and I think it's really pretty. It's kind of hard to see because of the bad lighting. But yeah, I've personally been having a lot of fun and doing a lot of crafts. I think in terms of the college admissions, I think it's been good. Obviously I've had to shift the way that I work with a lot of students. In the past, I've always had remote students, so ever since I started working, I've had students working with me from New York and, in North Bay who wouldn't come to me in person. But now, of course, there's a larger percent of students working with me who are now video calling. So obviously it's a new dynamic. It's been really exciting. We've still been able to see a lot of success during this period. So I'm still very optimistic towards the future.
Now my next question is that entering high school as a freshman can be very scary, especially with regard to how building a resume throughout high school might actually sound like or be like in the future. So how would you advise an underclassman to choose their extracurriculars and classes along with preparing for the college application process? And would you per se recommend that underclassmen start thinking about college applications early on?
Absolutely. And so, my recommendation is that students should ideally start working with me actually the summer after 8th grade, right? And what that gives us is just a lot of flexibility and a lot of wiggle rooms to experiment, to try things out, to get to know yourself. So one of the things that I talk to students about is that the reason we need to start in 8th grade is, first off, like many students are still unclear of their career choices, right? And so maybe they're not sure if they want to be a STEM student, if they want to go into English, so on and so forth. And the career exploration process is one that just takes a lot of time, right? You can't rush it. You can't do that in a month. That's something that maybe takes like a year or 6 months of active exploration, doing research, talking to professionals, so on and so forth. And the earlier you figure out your major, the earlier you can start to tailor your application towards specializing as that kind of student. And so that's something where, again, like the longer you have kind of a runway, the easier it is for you to make sure you have flexibility, right? Many students will experience changes and even, decide that, oh, I thought I wanted to be a journalist. Now I want to be a medical doctor, right? And that requires, again, shifting all of your extracurriculars, all of your class selection. So you want to just find those things out and anticipate those as early as possible. And so that's one of the reasons that I usually have students work with me starting the summer of 8th grade to create a 4-year plan of all of the extracurriculars they're going to do, all of the academics they're going to do, so on and so forth.
For sure. Okay. Next up, choosing a major can also be tough for most high school students, as we discussed before. What would you maybe say are the key factors and considerations students should keep in mind when choosing a college major?
So I think the main thing is that and when you're choosing a major, you have to start with a really great understanding of your own strengths and your weaknesses, right? And so a lot of students will start the career exploration process by taking a career survey and listing out 50 jobs that they want. And that's definitely one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is starting more internally, right? So maybe starting more with a self-evaluation of like my personal top 3 strengths are X, Y, and Z. My personal pet peeves are top 1, 2, 3, and Z, so on and so forth. And really thinking about, what is it that you want out of a career, right? And I think it's okay to admit, some students are hoping to be, that career man or woman who becomes the CEO of Google. Some people just want to make enough to have a living. Some people want to find a job that allows them to do flexibility for sports and so on and so forth. So I think selecting a career really starts with first having a great understanding of yourself and then trying to fit that in with the pieces of like, what are the actual careers that meet my requirements? And I think if you go the other way, which is just like, let me look at a list of 50 careers and see which one I like, it can often feel really undirected and it can feel really intimidating to look at that overwhelming list of 50 and not have a process moving forward. So I'd really recommend to start with like a written self-reflection and then move on to try to fit those pieces together with the careers available.
How would you sort of maybe organize this written self-reflection? Like, should it basically be spontaneous with whatever you think you're interested in, or should it be more of a developed process that you sort of add on to over time?
That's a very detailed process. Like that's something where, if a student want to work with me on that, that we would sit down and like spend an hour and a half, one full class session setting that up. So, definitely you can, if you're working on your own, just try to structure it the best you can. Otherwise, you can come meet me and we'll set it up together.
Yeah, for sure. I think that basically starting off with writing down ideas that you're interested in could certainly help with this process, and it might also help with the common app personal statement. So I think that that idea is very effective. Next up, I wanted to talk about whether students should sort of think about shaping all of their extracurriculars around their intended fields of study, or should they still have a diverse profile for the college application?
So generally, I encourage students to have a certain baseline diversity of extracurriculars. Among those, I would encourage students to generally have around 4 extracurriculars in the major that they're going to study, as well as at least 4 outside of that area.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Next up, I wanted to talk about college lists. So making and narrowing down a college list can be confusing for many high school students. So how would you necessarily suggest students approach making a college list, and when should they perhaps maybe even start?
So most students work with me to form the college list right about now, actually. So June after their junior year. In terms of making the college list, the process that I go through first is first figuring out like our long-term goals. What are we trying to get out of college? And figuring out like what are the values that are actually our selection criteria. What I mean by that is that, when I see a lot of students maybe try to approach the college list themselves, what I see is that maybe they'll just take like a whole bucket list of notes on every school, right? And you'll end up with this like 50-page document or this like really long Excel spreadsheet that's kind of like overwhelming and it's kind of hard to pick out what matters. So what I would say is first to be picky about what you research, right? So for example, some of my students, when I ask them, what do you want to research about colleges? They'll say, oh, I want to research the location. And then I asked them, okay, would you ever reject a college due to its location? Are you saying that if you got into Harvard, but Harvard was in Ohio, you wouldn't go? And a lot of people say, you know what? Actually, location would be like a great nice to have, but it's never going to be my deciding factor, right? And you can see that if something is not going to be your deciding factor, then maybe it shifts towards the end of the spreadsheet, or maybe it doesn't appear on the research spreadsheet. So actually going and setting apart what are the criteria that do make a decision for you. Is it the engineering ranking on the US News Top 250? Is it the number of career fairs that we have? Really figuring out what about the college matters to you, and then also making sure to omit criteria, right? Maybe for some students, they don't care so much about the tuition. Maybe for some students, the location or the size of the school doesn't actually matter. So don't try to just fill out every single bucket of research based on what you see other people research. Think about what really matters to you and only research those criteria.
So basically just having a finite criteria that you look at when determining what colleges you're essentially interested in, correct?
Not just having a finite set of criteria, but having a clear process for even how you prioritize, right? Like understanding, is it number 1, prestige, number 2, tuition, number 3, engineering major, number 4, ease of graduation, number 5, dropout rate. Having not just a list of the criteria, but an understanding of like the waterfall process. If you get admitted to X school versus Y school, how does your priority list help you actually decide the end college you're going to go to? So having a prioritized and finite list, and also having a prioritized list of everything that doesn't matter, is what I would start with.
How would you maybe determine what schools are reach, target, and safety? Does it only would you only look at GPA, or what all factors would you maybe consider in determining that?
I think in the end, like students can do their best to guess, but it's better to work with a college counselor to like make sure you got the right categories. Definitely GPA and average SAT are great starting points. Some less obvious ones might be the average acceptance rate, maybe the engineering acceptance rate, and then a lot of schools will have a different acceptance rate for in-state and out-of-state. So just making sure that you're interpreting all those different factors. But yeah, I think using all of those factors and then taking your best guess and then confirming with the counselor is probably the best way to do it.
For sure, yeah, that seems like also a efficient way to actually find out how to narrow down a college list, as you should have a good amount of safeties, targets, and reaches. So yeah, that's very effective. Now I'd like to talk about college essays. College essays can also be extremely daunting, and often essay writing in college applications is different than regular essay writing one might do in classroom essays, for example. So how should students essentially go about getting used to the college essay writing process, and what would you recommend should be the sort of time students start on this process?
Yeah, Yeah, so most students, like I said, start the actual essay writing process with me right around now, so June after the junior year, and typically it's the biggest project that we work on. Basically, we have weekly meetings from June up till December working on the essays. The way the process works is, I think, first off, like the first essay, like you said, is very intimidating. And so usually in the first essay, like I work with students through every part of the writing life cycle, meaning like the first meeting, 1 week, we'll work on just the brainstorming and how to narrow down to the idea. The second week, what we'll work on is coming up with a thesis. The third week, what we'll work on is coming up with an outline. Then the 3 weeks after that is first draft, second draft, third draft. So, the first essay actually does take 6 or 7 weeks because it is very time consuming and it's the first time that the student is going through these parts of the life cycle. A lot of students, I think, are very familiar at school with how to write an argumentative essay or how to write a literary analysis essay. And so when I say, oh, you have to come up with an outline and a thesis for your college essay, which feels more like a story, a lot of people are really surprised by that and aren't sure about what that writing process looks like. Those steps are certainly necessary and absolutely still vital, even if you're having a narrative form. And so that's why in the beginning, the first essay maybe takes like 7 weeks. And then after that, you got your first one under the belt, you kind of feel like you have some, momentum going, you know what the process looks like. That's when we'll start to paralyze, right? So then maybe the second set of essays, then we'll start to work on 3 or 4 essays, like all the UCs together, right? And then 1 week you'll have a tracker where you're working on the third draft for one essay and then second draft for another essay and the outline for another one. But that's kind of just like the general writing phases that I would go through.
Are there any sort of type of essays, such as supplemental essays for specific colleges or the personal statement on the common applications, that you'd prioritize doing first before others?
For most students, the order that we go through is we do the Common App first, and then we do the 4 UCs because the UCs have an earlier deadline, right? UCs are due November 30th, which is earlier than most regular decision. So normally we do Common App so that you have that for any early admissions or early decisions. Then we do the 4 UCs, and then we'll follow it up with supplements in the order of deadlines.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I think that sort of provides a little more advice with regards to how to approach the essay process and sort of how to prioritize what essays to do. So definitely helpful. Lastly, I wanted to ask about whether making a high school resume to document academic and extracurricular achievements maybe might help in the application, and if so, how should students go about creating one?
Yeah, absolutely. I have every student of mine make a resume, whether they're in 8th grade or 12th grade. And when you're in the early stages, that resume can help you with getting a summer internship. When you're in later stages, that resume is a very useful piece of paper to hand over with your to your letter of a recommender so that they can kind of refer to it when they're writing your letter, to yourself when you're composing the Common App extracurricular list, so on and so forth. My biggest advice to students would be to actually look at a couple success examples before you start. Again, because I have many students like try to draft a resume for homework and then I just see what they come up with. And most of the time it's like, whoa, you wrote a resume for yourself without ever looking at a couple samples of successful resumes. So making sure to observe the examples, look at their formatting, look at the way that they describe the activities, look at the metrics they have before you just go and like start, diving into writing yours, right? It's the same mistake as most students make with essay writing is that they get so excited about the prospect of filling up the paper that they really just fill up the paper and write lots of words without thinking about the meaning and the impact behind them.
For sure, yeah. I think that maybe successful examples can sort of inspire you to create a resume that is both fitting and effective for the application process and an internship. So definitely also helpful as well. I'd also like to ask you about what you think might be the hardest part of the college application process and perhaps what's the best way to get out of it.
I personally think the hardest part of the college application process is making sure that you have personal growth driven extracurriculars. What I mean by that is that a lot of students understand that they need to have activities that look good on their resume. So what they do is that they make a club so that they can become the president of it. They join the math club so they can write it on their resume. And the easy mistake that you can make there is kind of getting into a rut where, like, let's say you're the president of the math club. Even as the president of the math club, you can do the same old thing as every president of the math club. You can show up, take the attendance, bring some snacks, have everyone there, and have everyone go home. And then you kind of don't think about math club for the next week until the next Friday. And then you rinse and repeat that for an hour. And then it's just like this robotic cycle. Those are not at all the types of meaningful, exciting extracurriculars that are either going to change your life, change the way that you think about life and the way that you think about solving problems, nor turn into exciting essays and stories at the end of it. So I would really encourage students to stop thinking about how do I fill up my resume with 10 activities, but rather start with a personal reflection. Me today compared to the person I am in the future, how would I like myself to be different? If your wish is to become a better communicator, maybe you set a goal about that and then you join speech and debate. If your goal is to become more patient, then maybe you start doing tutoring with, students with special needs. So really just thinking about your activities, not just as like, how can I do them, but how do they help me grow and change myself in terms of 10xing my perseverance, my time management, my patience. Not just the activity and doing it as a robot, but how can you grow through the process? And again, that's going to help you end to end from the start of actually doing the activities to sticking it through and not getting bored in the middle, to where you need to write a meaningful essay, not just about participating, but growing from your activity.
With that being said, thank you so much, Angela, for talking with us about the college application process. Would you like to talk about your college counseling business that you do?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
my company is called Angela Sun Consulting. We offer premium SAT, ACT, and college consulting services. On the SAT, ACT side, every single one of our tutors has scored a perfect SAT or ACT score. On the college consulting side, I help students end to end from 8th grade to the actual end application, writing their essays, so on and so forth. One of the specialties that I would highlight is definitely the essay writing process. I've edited well over 1,000 essays at this point, and I would say that almost every student I work with says that the essays we write are, hands down, by far, the best essays they have ever even seen in their lives. Like most of the students, they will take the essay they started with and the essay we end up with and be like, holy crap, I cannot believe that I made that. And that is the feeling that I want to give to everyone. I really love working with students on essays, both because it's a really fun process. A lot of students share with me these really intimate moments that sometimes they wouldn't even tell their parents about. And that's really joyful to be, part of such a relationship. And I also really enjoy it because I really think that I can help students 10x their essays. Just to give you an example, there's this book online, top 50 successful Harvard essays, right? And they release, other people who got into Harvard, what were the essays that they submitted? The essays that my students write are by far much, much better than that. So I really push my students to do excellent essay writing quality. And that's something that, I really think I deliver on. So definitely if students are interested, feel free to reach out. I do offer a free half-hour initial consultation. If you're interested in meeting, you can sign up at www.angelasunconsulting.com. And then Arnav, maybe you can link that in a pop-up or, put that in the description box to get that all in.
Yeah, for sure. The website will be in the description below, so make sure to check that out. Thanks for listening. Make sure to like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram at Inspirante_education, and follow our LinkedIn for updates on future episodes. If you're listening on Spotify, follow our Spotify as well. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified about new episodes. Stay tuned for our next episode.